Blackhawks fans, welcome in to Season 6, Episode 5 of the Four Feathers Podcast. It's Johnny Nani alongside my guy, Tony Marchese, coming at you on a Thursday, talking some Blackhawks hockey. We got a lot happen in between our last show and now, Tony. It's good to be back on the mic with you to discuss some of this.
Absolutely, Johnny. Happy Thursday. It's the start of the weekend here at On Tap Sportsnet. Glad to be on with you.
Yeah, good to be on. We got a packed show today. This one's called Tough Love, mainly based on some recent Blackhawks lineup decisions. We'll get into some of that in depth a little bit later. Talk about the first part of that homestand with 3 games in the books, some up and down play there. We'll take a look at guys coming back from injury potentially soon, and then do our usual segments, ruffle some feathers, give some tic taps, and take a look at what's on tap next. Before we do any of that, you know the drill. Go over and subscribe on YouTube at OnTap Sportsnet. Make sure you're following us on social media at Four Feathers Pod and at OnTap Sportsnet. And as always, visit OnTapSportsnet.com for all your Chicago sports literature and podcasting needs. Tony, let's jump right in. Blackhawks are hashtag back at the UC, enjoying a nice little homestand right now. Started off well, and you were in attendance there. I was out of town for the weekend, so give me the rundown of what the home opener was like.
Home opener, it was a good time. Obviously, probably the best game that we saw since we've last recorded. I know some people were talking about attendance, and I want to get into this one just a little bit here, Johnny. It was a little bit lighter of a crowd for the home opener than what I would have expected. I know they were around, 700 away from a sellout. It was not as rowdy up in the 300 level of the UC, but that made for some better lines for concessions, beers, bathrooms. Got to see all of the action, and there was plenty of it. Blackhawks obviously win this game pretty easily. Kind of disappointed didn't get to see Macklin Celebrini versus Connor Bedard, but for all intents and purposes, Johnny, it was a great home opener for the Blackhawks. They played really well. Mrazek looked pretty good. The offense had its best game by far so far this season. So obviously this is an opponent the Hawks should beat, and they took care of business there. And that's exactly what you want to see in a home opener game. Really set the tone. I mean, I know it didn't sort of carry through the remainder of the weekend, but it was a really good time.
Yeah, I just point to that tic-tac-toe goal that you and I discussed as we were driving up to Tuesday's game. But what a beautiful no-look pass from Bedard over to Tavo, down low to Foligno for the tap-in. I like some of the commentary afterward when Luke Richardson was giving Tavo some praise, and he was saying that, Tavo just thinks the game so well, and, he knows exactly where he's going to go with it. And he's like, he's so quick with the decision that even Foligno was almost caught off guard, but it ended up being a highlight reel play. So that was fun to see Blackhawks take care of business against a team that they should in the San Jose Sharks. So
I will add this, Johnny, on the home opener. Speaking of Tavo, definitely, if not the second loudest standing ovation during player intros. Everybody was glad to see Terry Vinen back in the Indian head sweater there at the Madhouse on Madison. So that was not something I was surprised with, but definitely so far early on, he's been the best offensive player on this team, arguably. So good to see him get that reception and sort of a homecoming for him as well.
Yep. It's good to have Tavo back, and I think Connor Bedard appreciates playing with him as well, obviously. I think the power play is benefiting too. That's a takeaway that you can have from these games, even despite a couple of losses. The power play is still looking pretty good overall. Obviously, a couple of missed opportunities, but no power play in the league is going to settle really above like a 40% mark. So for what the Blackhawks are doing so far, so good. Of course, as you'd said on our last episode, at some point we'll probably be breaking it down and what the hell's wrong with them. They haven't scored on a power play in 5 games, but that's not the case right now. So we'll save it for when that time comes. Unfortunately, a little bit of a letdown Saturday night against Buffalo. You get, down 2 goals and then rally back. Craig Smith, 2 tallies, assisted by Lucas Reichel. It was good to see him back in action and producing there, but you falter a little bit late, and that game slips away from you against a team that you probably could beat. I mean, right now you could say the Blackhawks and Sabres are in the same tier there.
Absolutely. I know Buffalo got off to just a god awful start, and this was sort of a get right game for them in many different ways, shapes, and forms. The Hawks stayed in it for the most part. They're rallying back just enough to keep it exciting, and then just not enough to get over the finish line and take that lead back. Obviously, you want a little bit better of a start to the homestand than just beating San Jose. And this one was kind of, in ways, a little bit laying an egg here in a team that you should beat, as you mentioned here, Johnny. But we kind of talked about this a little bit when we were given predictions last time. And I said Buffalo might be a little bit of a problem here. And they proved to be. So, this one is probably one that you're going to want back later on in the season. If this thing continues to sort of hover where it is right now, that was definitely one that you can circle on the schedule and say, if you put together a full 60 minutes of good hockey, you could have won this game.
I'm on mute. Tony, I think we should start circling those games. And off the top of my head right now, I would say you can go the Winnipeg game, pissing away Arvid Soderblom's very nice start to the season, and then this Buffalo game. I think some people could argue the Calgary game in there, but they're off to a flaming hot start right now. No pun intended, actually, very much intended, but they are sitting on top of that Pacific Division. So rolling on to Tuesday, you and I got to be in attendance, so that was a lot of fun. That was my first game of the year, your second. It was great to be back at the UC, even if, like you had mentioned in the home opener segment, the atmosphere wasn't as packed in terms of number of people out, but that's a weeknight game there. A little bit of less hype than a home opener it would get, right? Because, home opener, feels like a holiday in baseball and can be translated over into hockey. You got the festivities, the red carpet and all that, but regardless, you had a good team in town playing, and it was, I'll tell you what, defense was all out of sorts, but my God, did it make for a barn burner of a first period. And I thought this game was going to be, it was high scoring, 9 goals scored total, 6-3 loss for the Hawks. But with the way that first period was trending, I thought we were going to get like an 8-6, 8-5 game here.
Yeah, and a lot of credit to the Blackhawks for settling down a little bit and sort of grinding out a couple of goals there in the first. The opening segment of this game was just all Vancouver. There was times where I felt we might be, heading down to the FanDuel sports book to just watch the Frozen Frenzy for the remainder of the night, because I think they scored within the first 21 seconds. They were able to put up a couple more there, but kudos to the Hawks for keeping it relatively close in this one. They looked outmatched from the start, and they continued to look outmatched throughout the remainder of the game. That said, there was a couple of nice plays that the Hawks were able to put some pucks in the back of the net, and the offense was probably the only thing that you could talk about that looked good at portions of this game. That said, we're not going to get through talking about this one without a couple of controversial calls too, as well, Johnny, that were kind of head scratching as well. So they weren't helped by the officiating. That said, I don't think that they looked good enough to beat Vancouver right now. And I don't think that should be surprising to anyone who watches Blackhawks hockey.
Right. I think even if you lost, you'd just like it to be a cleaner game. But as you'd mentioned, those factors that play into it, the refs just egregiously, 7 guys on the ice that just wasn't called for too many men. The ref just missed it. Foligno was miffed at it. The Blackhawks bench was miffed at it. Foligno did say after the game that the refs did eventually own up to it. You can't go back and change it, unfortunately. It'd be nice to take that one off the board for Vancouver. Maybe it's different tone for the rest of the game, but such is life. It sucks, but hopefully that luck goes in the Hawks' favor sometimes. I'm not saying you should be egregiously trying to put too many men on, but maybe they give a little leeway on a change in a future game or something like that. But Tony, one thing that I am just still kind of confused on was the offside reviewed goal. It was called good goal on the ice, and then Blackhawks used the coach's challenge. And the way that the faceoff was won, it was Taylor Hall, I believe, trying to scoop it back into his defenseman behind him, and Vancouver, their winger, sneaks in inside the blue line puck goes back out. He's still all inside. You would think that he'd have to tag up. He didn't. Blackhawks thought that was the case too. Vancouver scores at the end of that shift. Call stands as is. Goal on the ice. So that one, the view that we had, once again, we were there. I don't have the, there's no all 22 like in the NFL for the NHL, right? So I didn't have a chance to watch it. Yeah, I didn't have a chance to go and dissect it too far. But from what we saw, what I saw on a replay even, looked like it was offside to me.
It looked like it was offside to me as well, Johnny. I did see an explanation, if you will. It wasn't the official NHL explanation, but somebody had mentioned that he pushed the puck, or the puck got pushed back out, and he tagged the line with one skate. And it was an overhead view. You can kind of start to see it if you watch the play about 100 times over. But right. When I look at this, it looks
the side
offside.
View. The side view is where you can't see the skate do that little glaze on the line, right?
Yep. So either way, very close play. That replay review probably took almost close to 5 minutes. At least it felt that way in real time. I don't know if somebody had it timed, but they took a long look at this one. All the texts that I got from people who were at home viewing this, the Rick Ball and Darren Pang seemed pretty miffed at this. Or it was Kaylee Chelios, I believe, on that call. The broadcast crew looked just as miffed as everybody else who was there in the stadium. We didn't get a replay of it, though. Probably until a good minute and a half.
We got one. Is
minutes. We
just
got one view.
Just the side, like the broadcast view would be.
Yeah, so we were sort of left in the dark in the stadium as to what was taking place there and all the different angles that they have to review this. But from what we saw, it was enough to leave everybody kind of heated in the UC.
Yep, I definitely was, because the Blackhawks need all the help they can get in that one with how out of sorts they were defensively. You hope that's something that they can iron out and straighten out. I would hope so for their upcoming games, last one of the homestand and moving on to the road trip. But Tony, another kind of big storyline surrounding Tuesday's game was the namesake of this episode, some tough love that Luke Richardson gave Philip Kurashev by making him a healthy scratch. And when you see that, I understand why it's surprising and all of that. But you would think that the world was collapsing around the Blackhawks because of an early season lineup decision here. I didn't think that was the case. It was warranted. I like when Luke Richardson explains his decisions, whether I agree with him or not. I can at least understand the thought process that goes into them. But Tony, my question for you is it the end of the world that Luke Richardson is healthy scratching Philip Kurashev, who started the season as your second line center? Here we are into, just about a week's worth of games in.
I don't think it's the end of the world by any stretch of the imagination. I will say, this season is a little bit different for Kurashev than it was last year when you're on a line with Connor Bedard and you're playing on that top line, and things sort of stayed the same. A lot of that was sort of the byproduct, you can say, of some injuries to guys like Taylor Hall, probably that created a need for Philip Kurashev to be up there with Bedard, but there was some good chemistry there. This is definitely an adjustment for him. I don't know if I agree totally with the reasonings. However, as you bring up the point that, at least Luke Richardson gives you an explanation as to why, I'm sure he's had the conversation with his player as to the reasons why. And you want to see it have its intended effect of motivating the player. This is not something new for Luke Richardson. We saw this last year with Lucas Reichel. Lucas Reichel, to start the season, was on the pine himself and came out there and started to play really well once he was inserted into the lineup. There's a couple of guys that are going to need minutes as well here that the Blackhawks have brought in. I know people are still going to want to get mad at the fact that there's veterans here on this team. But that said, I look at this more as, hey, here's a little early season rest. Maybe that sends a message to Philip Kurashev to, put put a couple pucks in the back of the net when he comes back and insert into the lineup. But I don't think it's the end of the world the way that a lot of people sort of made it out to be, Johnny. I don't know if you agree with my assessment on this. I think you're a little bit more hard pressed on, this is normal activity. I think that there's some reasons where people can be somewhat upset that he wasn't in the lineup, but I don't think that the game changes there just if Philip Kurshev's in the lineup versus not in the lineup.
Right. Part of it was him cheating towards an offensive play and essentially giving up position to his man. If you want the technical reasoning, that's in the game on Saturday against Buffalo. And Luke Richardson didn't like it. And because he's come to expect Philip Kurashev to, for the most part, be a positionally sound player. That was the technical reasoning for it. And I was out of town, so unfortunately I wasn't able to watch that Saturday night game live. But going back and looking at a few clips, I could see the reasoning. Maybe feels a little harsh. Sure, I get it. But once again, brings me back to the title of this episode, Tough Love. And Brad Marchand of the Boston Bruins had a quote today that really resonated with me, Tony, and I got to read it off if people missed it. Marchand got reamed out by his coach, Jim Montgomery, for a mistake that he made in a game. And of course, it's a big hoopla because that's a star player. Your coach is going in on you. There's the visual of it. You can't exactly hear what they're saying if it's an altercation on the bench. But they asked him if, rubbed him the wrong way or what the deal is. Here's what Marchand said. It's unfortunate how coaches are scrutinized over things like that. There's a lack of unaccountability nowadays because people can't handle the heat. You make a mistake like that, you deserve to hear about it. Okay, was Philip Kurashev's infraction as bad as whatever Brad Marchand did in his game? I don't know. I don't have a side-by-side video of the instances. However, I agree with his overall message that he delivers there. There's a lack of unaccountability nowadays because people can't handle the heat. Fans, if you're not behind the bench, sure, you're more than free to disagree with Luke Richardson's decisions, but he's not just doing it to just go willy-nilly and say, oh, F this guy. People like to talk about the doghouse. That's a neat way for us to describe things like that. Well, if you actually listen to Luke Richardson's answers and not just look at what the lineup move was on the beat, reporter's Twitter, he'll actually give you an explanation. You can agree with it or not, but at least go and seek out the context. That would be my advice. And if you're looking for that, go to Blackhawks.com. They have, for the most part, after every morning skate practice game, that media availability, they will go and post clips from each person that was interviewed there. Whenever I've gone in detail and listened to Luke Richardson, once again, if I agree with him or not, I can at least understand the process behind it. So this is why I am just going to push back on and say a little bit that the heat that Luke Richardson is getting for this is overblown, in my opinion.
I would agree. I love this quote from a player that I really don't like. But I agree with the premise of this. And, it's his decision. Eventually, if things aren't working, I would think that Kyle Davidson would have enough sense to move on from Luke Richardson if he didn't like the things that he was doing right now with this club. Obviously, we're not going to agree with every single thing that Luke Richardson does. We've never agreed with every single thing that a coach does. Even Joel Quenneville in his time here was questioned by fans.
You want to talk about doghouse? He was one to actually put someone in a doghouse, both in game and in the press box.
Yes. Yeah. So if you think back, this isn't uncommon in hockey. Seth Jones. I love this. I don't know if this is our guy Ron Burner.
Incredible profile picture, by the way.
Yes.
Seth
This
Jones
might be Ron Luce. We're not positive. Go ahead and read it out.
Yeah. So Seth Jones says, I always tell Hawks fans, remember, Chicago is a sports city, not just a hockey town, like we saw on our last run. Fans always overreact too soon, then follow the Bears, Cubs, Bulls, Sox until we make the playoffs. It's time to have accountability and see which young guns rise to the top. Yeah, it's part of accountability right here. Richardson thought that Philip Kurashev wasn't giving them their best, what they're expecting of him, and he made a decision based on it. And guess what? They had a conversation about it. Sure, Philip Kurashev aired his side of it. Said, of course, any player's going to say nobody likes to sit in the press box. It's always, you don't want to hear that you're not going to be playing tonight. But message got through, right? He's back in there at practice today. Guess what? Andreas Athanasiou, another veteran, is going to be a healthy scratch. on Friday when the Blackhawks take the ice against the Predators. So these kinds of things, if you get yourself so worked up over it, especially this early in the season, man, you're going to blow a gasket. So I would say to just go and seek out context. That would be my advice to Blackhawks fans, Tony.
By all means, if you want to get worked up over it, if that's what helps you get through the day, go ahead. I mean, you've got every right as a fan. But it's early. I don't think that as much as we want this team to just take that leap, as we talked about in the seats, man, there's still a lot of pieces that need to be brought in on this team in order for that to happen. Is Philip Kurashev a top 6 forward? I don't know if we know that for sure. I don't know if we know that for sure. Johnny, do you?
I think
on a competitive hockey club?
Just based on what we've seen so far, we know kind of, I don't know if you could call it ceiling or whatever, but highest end of his play so far with Bedard last year, right? I think Ron and I talked about this when we were like evaluating players. On a competitive team, you're probably slotting Kurashev in as a middle 6 forward. So that means likely on the wing and likely on the second or third line. So
not
take
2C.
That for what you will.
Maybe not
in
2C.
My opinion. In my opinion.
That's fair. I'm surprised that he's playing center right now, but that's
Frank Nazar wasn't ready to take the job. So
yeah. We talked about that as well in the last episode, but hey, no, this is good discussion. I think, for all intents and purposes, the quote that you read out hits the nail on the head. It's a different situation, but applicable here. Good context.
You want the resolution to this whole saga too, this 3-day saga. This is today, practice on Thursday. Richardson says Kurashev took it like a man. He'll be back in there Friday, and he will be better for the team. Kurashev echoed those sentiments, not in those same exact words in what he said there. Voila, bug squashed. Tough love is okay. That's how I end this segment.
Doesn't seem like there's any hurt feelings, and that's what we want.
No locker room drama. All right.
No.
Okay, we move on to recent roster updates. Artem Levshinov was activated off of IR and sent to the Rockford Ice Hogs, where he'll soon make his debut. Alec Martinez looks set to join the road trip, which starts Saturday in Dallas, and Laurent Brossoit is about 1 to 2 weeks away, so a little more Arvid Soderblom coming at you. Makes it seem like he will probably start Saturday in Dallas when they start that road trip. So that's on the roster moves. Tony, CHSN updates. If we had any updates, we'd share them with you. Status quo from last week. They're still in standoff with Xfinity / Comcast, working on deals with Fubo, Hulu, same as last week. That's status quo. But we got a little bit of word from the president of CHSN, Jason Coyle, kind of went on the offensive in some interviews with the media regarding the Comcast negotiations. Do his comments change your perspective at all, saying that, we already would offer it at a discounted rate because we just want it to be in that same tier as where NBC Sports Chicago was, even though they take less money than NBC Sports Chicago was? Does this little media blitz change your perspective on it at all?
I mean, I think I was already sort of, I don't know what the right word is here, but in our discussion on our last episode, I sort of brought up the fact that Xfinity wants to include them in their highest pricing tier, and that's going to cost fans more. And, what is it that you really want on the fan side? And maybe this is just because I dislike Xfinity as a person more than I dislike my favorite teams. I don't personally want to pay more as an Xfinity subscriber to get what I would consider on the broadcast side, maybe a subpar product to what you got from NBC Sports Chicago. I mean, we can argue about what the production value is, but so far I would rate the production value of this product a little bit lower. So why, as a consumer, do I need to pay more to Xfinity every month for this? And as the president of CHSN comes out and says, we want to, take less of a fee here and try and get a deal done, and they're not budging. I've sort of thought this was more or less on the Xfinity side. I know there's a lot of people out there who I don't give a shit, put it on whatever tier it takes to get it on my television so that I don't have to go through, antennas and illegal streams and everything just to get my hockey or my basketball and soon to be Chicago White Sox at some point. The product on the ice, the product on the court, and the product on the field really don't help in any one of those cases at all. So I don't know if it really changed my mind, more or less sort of validated my statement of, why would that be good for the fan to pay more? Now, one can make the argument that if they go to direct consumer route, and there was some leakings, I think through Ben Pope, that they've got an app that's almost ready to go direct to consumer, but they want to get something done. Even as an Xfinity subscriber, just from my perspective, I might just do the direct to consumer route rather than up my Xfinity package, because it depends on where you want to spend your money as a consumer here. It's not just, what's going to be the easiest. And maybe the streaming option direct to consumer is easier than the Xfinity. Who knows? But I had a feeling for a long time that this was not just the CHSN problem. If their message is true and they do want to be in every household, I'm sure they want to put it on they want Comcast to offer it at a price point.
That middle tier of Xfinity. Yeah.
It's exactly where NBC Sports Chicago was. I don't see why Xfinity can't budge on their end of the deal and they don't get as much heat. Now, that doesn't change the fact every time CHSN throws something up on X that everybody's going to go pile on them.
Right.
It's people are angry, and I get it. I'm angry too. But that said, I don't know if it changed it as much as it just validated for me. How about you?
Right. I like that it just adds some context. Like you said, you have to now then, do you believe Jason Coyle, the president of CHSN, is he fully, transparent in his comments and what's going on with these negotiations? But it at least peels back the curtain a little bit, because before CHSN was catching most of the flack, right? Whereas now I think people can realize that it's more of a it takes two to tango sort of deal. And obviously Xfinity is in the position of strength here. But at the same time, you can go and look at that. I think our own Pat Comiskey should probably take a look at that interview so he knows where to direct his ire, right? Things like that.
I think he read it.
Yeah.
I think he read it, and I still saw him come back and tell CHSN to.
Right. So that leads to the next point, and you had kind of hinted at it. CHSN now on their socials are pushing for fans to contact Comcast and demand that they carry CHSN on their, tiers of Xfinity. And then they're also now putting out promos, I just saw today, for DirecTV Stream. Make the switch from Xfinity is what they're saying. So I don't know if that's not so in any good relations there. However, it is a strategic play, because if things weren't budging where they were before, when they said that they already made one move, like I said, this is Coyle's account, so take it if you will, that they offered, or they, agreed to take less money than NBC Sports Chicago was getting for those carriage fees. This is now just their next chess move in this whole dance that we're doing here, Tony.
Here's my sort of take on this. This is where I'm a little bit angry. I don't know, people want to come back and say they had a whole year to figure this out, right? They knew that this was coming. It seems as if, and this is just what I'm judging based on what I've seen on social media. It seems as if, as part of this deal, CHSN acquired all of the social media accounts of NBC Sports Chicago. So all of those accounts miraculously overnight changed over. There's new logos on some of them. In fact, there's still the NBC Sports logo. If you go to Threads and you look up NBC Sports Chicago, it says CHSN and it still has the logo. They haven't even changed the logo yet. So if you want to know how things are going over at CHSN, they haven't changed the logo on Threads. It still says NBC Sports Chicago on it, and they're tweeting at or I don't know, threading, whatever it is. I don't really use Threads, but I saw this the other day and I kind of got a laugh out of it. You can't talk to your consumer without the social media aspect. So what I wish was happening in a way was, start a CHSN account, start getting a following as soon as the announcement was made so that you could have informed fans, we don't have an Xfinity deal. Start getting on Xfinity so that we can do, and that's what should have happened about 6 months ago. And I don't know the contract and how this all worked, but they didn't have a medium to connect with the consumer until the official launch. And that was probably a byproduct of NBC Chicago saying, we don't want you, putting out social media content or talking with anyone. So they were already behind the 8 ball. I believe they probably thought they were going to get a deal done before the first regular season or second regular season game of the Blackhawks schedule. And once they sort of hit that,
let's be real. They're probably thinking by the Bulls opener.
Yes. And this is where the panic sets in here. And that's why you're starting to see this now. But a lot of these things could have taken place. Sign up for a mailing list, just a newsletter or something on the website. They took over the website too. That's what's also interesting to me. There was over a decade worth of content of Chicago sports content that was on NBC Sports Chicago that's gone. And it's now just the landing page for CHSN. So they took over most of this infrastructure. They had no way to communicate or put out any of these, bulletins to fans. Talk to a writer or a third party. Go to Ben Pope, go to Casey Johnson, and have something released out there way ahead of time before you get to this and say, we're trying to negotiate with Xfinity. It's not going well.
Casey Johnson might have been their best bet. I don't know what his contractual obligation with NBC Sports Chicago was, but obviously it was known towards the end of that he was going to go over and join CHSN, right? So that probably
I'm sure there were some no non-disclosures or you can't talk about this clauses, and there was a lot of secrecy involved, and it was a huge media shakeup in Chicago. You could have had Chuck Garfien talking about this on the White Sox post game if we wanted full transparency through all of this. I'm not sure that NBC Sports Chicago would have loved that. Again, we're not them, we don't know, but my opinion here, and this is where I'm at, is that they didn't tell people that this was going to happen. Everybody sort of just found out about it as the season started. That's where the ire comes from.
I will say, I know you had mentioned that it was, basically right up until they switched everything over, basically on that October 1st date for the most part. You're right. But I remember when there was that little hype video, that commercial that they're running about promoting, what CHSN is. And it was actually a clever little commercial, like Jim Cornelison was being wrapped up in bubble wrap and stuff like that. Right. They had, believe, created a CHSN PR account, but that was only about 2 weeks before the official launch. That was like mid-September, I remember, because White Sox season was still going on, and Ozzy was in that thing, right? So I think they just got themselves behind the 8 ball there, because if they were able to do that in that last window there, couldn't they have done that last July, right?
Yeah. I mean, we could have started this whole thing where you want to get the consumer on your side. And right now, I think that their moves are more defensive than they are playing offense here in these negotiations. It's all perception, man. And the perception right now is CHSN bad. And you know what? Some of that has to do with who's behind it, unfortunately.
Yep, I agree. So we'll keep you tuned up to date on any updates that come about regarding CHSN and their carriage, possible agreement with Comcast / Xfinity. Make sure you follow us over on socials at Four Feathers Pod at On Tip Sportsnet. We'll post them as soon as we know anything. Okay, moving on, Tony, to our regular segments in the show. As we always do, it's time to ruffle some feathers. Looks like I'm the only one that's got one right now. It's a contract that was signed today. This is not Blackhawks related, but it is NHL related. Shea Theodore locked up for big money long-term in Vegas. That is just their future LTIR cheat code that they're ensuring, because he's like 29, I believe, going on 30 right now. So he's going to be 37, 38 towards the end of that deal. Defensemen probably aren't running on their best strength then at that big cap hit. Guess what? Shea Theodore, you got a ghost injury, and we are going to bring in whatever we need as we're pushing for the playoffs at the end. We've seen them do it. It's their formula. You can go and say, oh, it's not cheating. It's allowed by the rules. I get it. They use it egregiously. It's not us. I'm going to call it out. That's ruffle some feathers.
Love it. And I can't wait to revisit this in 5 to 6 years and see where we're at. It's kind of a Seth Jonesy type contract here. So it'll be interesting to see what this all pans out to be. And I want to see if there's fan ire towards the end of it.
Yep. We'll keep tabs on it. Okay.
I've got
one.
I've got one that I've been cooking.
Oh, you got
up,
one?
Johnny.
You got to put these in the rundown, man.
Yeah, I know, but I've got to cook these things up in my mind a little bit, make them work, because then you never know which one I want to go with. The one I'm going to go with today, though, is I want Connor Bedard to score some fucking goals. I know he's got one on the year, but fan interest right now, and people have been calling this out, is at an all-time low. You've got the CHSN, you've got probably not the most competitive hockey team here. One thing is going to get people re-engaged, and that's some highlight reel goals from Connor Bedard. And we haven't really seen that yet through the first, 7 games here so far. Let's get some highlight reel Connor Bedard goals. Stat. Pronto. I want him fast, because that's what's going to get people re-engaged. He is the superstar. Yes, he's still playing pretty good hockey right now, but I want that highlight reel shit, man. That's what's going to get people excited. That's what's going to put butts in seats, and that's what's going to get the attention of your media potential partners and carriers to want to carry your product, because people want to see a superstar. I want those superstar moments. We need to blast them out there. I know last year people were talking about Connor Bedard fatigue and everything. I want to bust out the salt shaker memes quickly here, Johnny. And so that's my ruffle some feathers right now. It's directed at Connor Bedard's offensive production. We need some goals.
Right. Yeah. No, it's a production, right? Because you can go and look at the analytics and say that he's on track for it and all of that. But guess what? Analytics don't like the lamp. Sure, put yourself in a better position to do so. And I will say that I do think the levee is going to break fairly soon here. It'd be very nice if he did it in front of the home crowd on Friday night. But he is still getting shots, so that's at least encouraging. Yes. He could probably even benefit from shooting a little bit quicker in certain instances, just because that quick whip, the whippy stick that he's got, plus just his insane shot release, that could, all be coming together nicely here soon. And you know what? Every once in a while you get a bounce too, right? You shoot it and it, hits off the inside of the defenseman's knee, barely grazes off his stick. Goaltender can't react fast enough. Maybe that's just what it takes to get him go and break the levee. But I agree. You want those highlight reel moments, and that would help reinvigorate, some of the spirit behind the Blackhawks and what's supposed to be a better season. So, okay, we move on. Stick taps. Looks like we're both going UC concessions here. Go ahead, lead it off.
Great to see our beer guy, Tony, there up at right behind 324. Love that guy. He's awesome. Always has a Budweiser ready for me at the intermission. Just happy to be back at the UC now twice so far this season, seeing a familiar face. Stick taps to you, Tony. Hope you're doing well.
Yep. So mine goes out to the first UC beef of the season. I had it Tuesday at the game. It was exquisite. I can only find it in one location now. They used to be at the Chicago Dishes, but you can at least look it up and see where they're at. So for those interested in a good Italian beef, I love the UC beef. I swear by it. It's at the Giordano stand outside section 120. We got there early enough. I was able to get it, have it with pregame beer. We got into our seats, plenty of time, watch the orchard, the anthem, all of that. So hot jardinera on that. Ooh, so good. So good. Stick taps.
Do we talk two other concession things while we're on the topic of concession, Johnny?
Go for it.
Have yet to see the hockey stick beer at the UC now in 2 trips. Don't know where that's at. If anybody who's listening to this show knows where to acquire one of these things, please send the Four Feathers guys a little memo as to where these things exist. I know I could probably look it up, but if anybody knows the secret place to go get them, would love to get that. Second thing, where was the Dasher bar the other night in the atrium?
I believe they prefer that more for the big events, usually weekend games and that home opener. Okay. That's where they have that. So I've noticed that.
Missed that thing. The guys that worked at are absolutely phenomenal as well.
Yep, and I like Dasher Bar because they have a TV set up in there too. Then
yeah,
don't have to go into
no Dasher Bar.
don't have to go into that FanDuel lounge if you want to go and see something while you're watching pregame. So yeah, I agree. But Dasher Bar should be there on weekends most of the time, in my experience. So okay, we move it on to looking at what's on tap next. We're gonna look at these games, upcoming matchups, next 3 for the Hawks. But before we do that, we are going to backtrack to our predictions from last week. And Ron's not on the show, but he said 3-0-0 against San Jose, Buffalo, Vancouver. Obviously, they went 1-2 here. I said 3-0-0 because I was going to be there Tuesday, and I thought those other 2 would be wins. So, Tony, you said 2-1-0. You're the closest here. Do we award a point or no? This is the first little hang-up that we've had on this.
I was going to ask you, as you and Ronald started this new tradition, I would give myself a point just because I want the point.
I would too, because we're playing a competition against each other here, and you were closest. So when you're playing closest to the pin, even if you don't get the hole in one, you still win, right?
Yeah. So we can do this as closest to the pin rules. Yeah, we can award the point here. This is going to be.
You get the point. So you're tied.
Maybe we give out in hockey style. We give out 2 points if somebody gets it.
I said we're going straight up.
All right. There we go. I was just thinking outside the box here. I wasn't on the original.
If 2 people nail it, then they can both get a point. That's the thing. That's the one exception.
Okay. All right. I'm tied with Ron.
You could have up to as many as 3 points awarded a week, but there's no 1, 2, 3 tier here. Okay, so you're an honor on the board. I'm not Nostranani lagging behind. It's bad luck for me.
You are lagging behind.
It's a bad look for me. Okay, what's on tap next? Friday, finish up the homestand against Nashville, 7:30. That is an ESPN Plus / Hulu exclusive. Saturday at Dallas, that'll be 7 o'clock on CHSN, and then they're back at it Monday at Colorado, 8 p.m. on CHSN. Tony, right before we jumped on this, the Hawks shared out a thing like a little graphic to promote the game for Friday night, and it said on the big stage tomorrow, and it was actually a really cool graphic with Foligno and a few other players, and the United Center with the Blackhawks Predators logos where they would be as you're walking up to the UC, on Madison Street there.
Mm-hmm.
But the caption is what gets me there. On the big stage tomorrow. If it was on ESPN or nationally on TNT, a nationally televised game, I'd be like, okay, that makes sense. You're talking about a streaming exclusive, Tony. That doesn't exactly scream big stage to me.
I'm just seeing this right now, and I'm just as puzzled as you are.
Like I said, isn't the graphic sweet, but the caption just throws me off of it?
Yeah. Awesome graphic, whoever put that together.
They've been,
people seem to be excited because they can actually watch it, though.
Right, yes.
If you've got an ESPN Plus or Hulu subscription.
I did see
maybe that is a big stage.
You know what, Tony? I understand their plight, but I cannot relate because I can watch them on CHSN since I'm on a DirecTV service. So I cannot relate to the plight there, but I understand it and stand in solitude with y'all.
Are they trolling themselves?
Maybe.
Because that's what that feels like to me. I don't know.
Maybe. Or maybe it's just their usual brand of spitting out odd captions because whoever runs it. Apparently, that's what you need to run a professional sports team's social media in this day and age. Very odd.
I love the people who are still on here saying we can't watch it on Comcast tomorrow. Yeah. It wasn't going to be on Comcast in the first place.
Oh, these are the same people that'll just put it all on CHSN, which is why, dating back to our conversation about that, I think it was good for James Coyle to at least get some perspective out there.
He should go on a full-on media tour and get on a podcast with whatever the official podcast is and talk about the negotiations, maybe outside of the statement. I don't know. Yeah, who knows?
Yeah. Okay. We're looking at this. Central Division foes, Tony. Nashville, Dallas, Colorado. How do you see the Blackhawks record shaking out here as we run our predictions?
I hate Nashville, so I want that win. I'm going to go win in Nashville. Dallas and Colorado sort of scare me. I think this winds up 1-2. I'm I don't know which way it'll all shake out. I want that win against Nashville. Obviously, want to see them better than 1-2, but just the way this has gone so far, I do think they'll get a win out of this group. I'm going to go 1-2 here.
Okay, I am going 1-1-1. I believe Dallas will be an overtime game. I remember some very something about that building. Some very heated contests that had gone down there. I know they got their break speed off on New Year's Eve last year, but there have been some other occasions there. There was some chaos in Dallas. So I'll go with that. Overtime loss, win against Nashville, lost to Colorado. Not that it matters in that, but as long as we have the numbers right. So you got 1-2. I got 1-1-0. Sucks. I like predicting wins, but unfortunately, got to call it like we see it. So that's about it here. Tony, final thoughts?
It's hockey season. I know it's still early. I want to see some better hockey, full 60-minute hockey. We've had some stretches where they've looked very competitive, playing a little bit more of a physical game, shooting the puck a lot more, which I like to see. Maybe a little bit more defense, taking the step forward here. Seth Jones had a rough game. I know Ron's got a lot of things to say about Seth Jones, but want to see, Seth and Vlasic start to shut some guys down.
He was one of 18 that had a rough game, a rough defensive game.
True.
So
that's very true. Very true. Some context is definitely necessary there, but
it's not excusable. He should be your best defender. I agree, but it was a
full team,
just
60 minutes in one of these games, and hopefully Friday to just sort of kick off this weekend. It's the last home game before a road trip. Give the fans something to be excited about who show up on a Friday night to the UC. That'll definitely help in the attendance department going forward.
Yep, they've been promoting the hell out of that Friday night hockey thing. I believe they're even making custom like beer cups. Same like your standard plastic, same size as the other ones. They have the Bulls and Hawks logo on it, but they've been promoting the hell out of it. They'll have like a little matchup thing and have the date on it. So I'm hoping they put on a good show for that. And my final thought answers your ruffle some feathers. The dam breaks Friday for Connor Bedard. Goals going in the back of the net. That's my final thought. That'll about do it for season 6, episode 5 of the Four Feathers podcast. This was Tough Love. Hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you're subscribed over on YouTube, on Tap Sportsnet there. Follow us on the socials at Four Feathers Pod and at On Tap Sportsnet. And as always, check out ontapsportsnet.com for all your Chicago sports, literature, and podcasting needs. We'll be back with you midweek next week after these next 3 Hawks games. Until then, let's go Hawks.
Let's go Hawks.